Tyler Smith joins us from the Hoosier.com. Indiana basketball coming off of maybe their best performance and worst performances of the year in back-to-back games, a game in which they nearly knock off the number 2 team in the country and follow that up nearly being beaten on their own floor by the number 200 team in the country. Quite a stark contrast of play within a week.
Yeah, pretty wild 4 days. Obviously we've talked about how there's a lot of parity in the college game now, but there's still no excuse for the performance that they put together Tuesday. And I can relate in many ways to Coach Woodson. As a coach myself, there's been many times, obviously not the same level as this, but many times where you let your team know that you can lose any night if you don't bring it, and prepare every game as if it is a rivalry game or a big game, and then they just don't come to play. And hopefully the practice yesterday kind of lit a fire and let them know that's unacceptable, and hopefully we see a different team against North Alabama, because it's a pretty similar squad to Morehead State and a lot of these other teams that Indiana's played in the non-conference throughout the year. So pretty wild, though. We kind of see what they're capable of with I believe they're up 50-37 late over Kansas. Everything was clicking, and then obviously, complete opposite on Tuesday. So pretty wild 4 days.
Yeah, and the play of Indiana starters was what drew the most ire, because it was the first game after playing Kansas, like I said, a game in which Mike Woodson went away from what he has been doing the last 2 years with his substitution patterns. And well, not really the last 2 years, this year more so than last, because last year he rode Trace Jackson Davis and Jalen Hood-Schifino a lot. And he got back to that in the Kansas game with his best players playing them more minutes than he had been doing so. And they just did not perform against Morehead State. You had a couple of starters that didn't score. All 5 of them accounted for only 12 first half total points against Morehead State, which I don't even know how that's possible at home.
Yeah, especially when that's coming right after people like us and media and the fans and people that cover the team were talking about how well the starting 5 were playing together, and how they should shrink the rotation, and did work against Kansas. He mentioned a couple guys might have got a little gassed in that Kansas game, but yeah, it's unfortunate for the very next game for the starters to kind of lay an egg when the net rating, all those analytics, all those ratings throughout the season, that first 5 has been a net positive and played really well. It's when you get the subs in that things get a little wonky. So that'll be interesting to see tonight's game and moving forward how that all works out. I'm hoping that when Xavier Johnson comes back, if and when he does, hopefully in a few games, I would personally, shrink the rotation to having, let's see, Cups and Walker and Banks off the bench. And then at this point, unless they step it up, I would only play Gunn and Sparks in moments of, guys need a quick break or there's foul trouble or injuries. Otherwise, I would shrink that rotation to 8 players.
Yeah, you're going to have Gabe Cupps can step in because he has been playing plenty, and Xavier will need that. He's not going to be able to come back and play 20 minutes a game right off the bat, I don't think. We'll have to see, but I would think that they would really bring him along. But of course, you can't baby him too long, because when he returns, I'm going to assume that's going to be at the same time as Big Ten play resumes in Lincoln at Nebraska.
Yeah, schedule will get crazy from there with the Big Ten slate. Indiana's fortunate to have that 2-0 start. I was thinking too with that game that obviously no one's going to be too optimistic about. They're going to have bad feelings towards the Morehead State game. We could look back on that game later in the year and think how important it was that they did get lucky enough to win. Because as Todd was saying, they don't have any big wins on their resume, but they couldn't afford a bad loss. I don't have one of those yet either. So, yeah, I think as far as X goes, will be a bit of a time where he's got to get his conditioning back up and also kind of test the foot, the ankle, make sure that he's good to go, because this team could really use him for the stretch of Big Ten games.
Yeah, tonight's opponent, North Alabama, 6-6 on the year, and they have not looked impressive to say the least. So this is what you call a good old fashioned get right game for Indiana, and they need to do that. They need to get out. They need to bum rush North Alabama, and I don't mean for them to win. I mean for their own mentality. They need to come out and have the mindset of hitting the floor and playing hard now until you come out of the game. Mm-hmm. And that is something they just didn't have in the last game against Morehead State. Part of that was due, I'm sure, to the loss to Kansas. But you know what? Indiana didn't get upset in that game. Indiana didn't get beat on a last-second shot in that game. Indiana got beat because they turned the ball over and didn't hit free throws in that game.
Yeah, they need a game tonight where they're playing for 40 minutes right from the tip, a lot of energy. As Anthony Walker said, create their own energy, and he said they will the rest of the year. And it just needs to be a good night where they respond, where it's kind of a game where you exhale and say, okay, we had a rough one Tuesday, but we're ready to go now. They're 13.5-point favorites. They've only covered the spread a few times all season. It'd be nice to cover that and really have a game where there's no doubt. North Alabama's, as you mentioned, not very impressive, especially on the road. They're 1-5 on the road. They do have a couple scorers. They got a couple guys that shoot near 50 from three, and that's not even their top two scorers. Their top two scorers like to get to the rim. So they're capable, but every college team is capable of scoring if you don't come out ready to guard. So hopefully they come out ready to guard with a lot of passion, energy, and put them to bed early and kind of exhale for the rest of the schedule.
Yeah, North Alabama, KenPom has them 225th. Their net ranking is 226th. So we'll see if those guys are another group that come into Assembly Hall and are able to ignore the surroundings and trappings of where they are and play up. Morehead State didn't care where they were. They came in looking to win and to beat Indiana the other night and damn near did it. Now, this is not a team that's as good as Morehead State was. I'll grant you that. So this should be a game where Indiana can get back onto the good side of things, especially they've got one more game after this before they get into Big Ten play. And that first game, man, it's on the road and it's at Nebraska, and it's going to be a sneaky game. We'll talk about that when we get to it. I know it's a few games away, but just looking ahead, you hope that Indiana does have Xavier back by then. But is it going to take? What will that do to the offense? It's obviously will speed it up a little bit because right now, as Todd Leary has pointed out on the postgame show, Gabe Cupps is just a guy who brings the ball up the floor for the most part. And after he crosses the half-point line, the ball didn't touch his hands a lot after that.
Yeah, it gives them another threat, gives them a lot more experience. I think on both sides of the ball, Johnson is a help. Obviously, fans know, there's kind of an up and down career for him as far as, occasional turnovers, occasional, games where he's not shooting well. But this team definitely needs him. And I was thinking, just yesterday, the thought that, teams are starting to defend IU a little differently. They're starting to really pack in and double, whether it's Ware or Renew. And Johnson gives them that additional playmaker and passer as well. So if they get doubled and he's the first one that gets the kick, he's going to be able to facilitate a little better because you watch some film and you see that, the teams have really tried to take out Ware, and it's really impacted the rest of the offense. So it's going to be faster. Another shooter. He's 5 of 10 from three so far this year. So it gives him another threat. And he does a lot of little things well. So it's going to be important for him to get back.
Absolutely. And Indiana has also, they still seem to be seeking their identity. I know that they're an inside out team. Everything is still running through the middle, whether it's through Kel'el Ware, who has not been very productive. I wish I should have pulled his stats up for the last couple of games, because over the last 2, maybe 3 games, he has really had a poor performance from the field. I think he hit 3 shots in the last game or 2, and it was the same the game before that. So he's had some rough goes of it here of late from the field. Pulled down 15 rebounds was that the last game or the Kansas game? But so it's not that he's not active, but teams are going to focus on Kel'el Ware. He's Indiana's leading scorer. Of course they are. Indiana's going to have to learn how to deal with that, and he's going to have to learn how to deal with that.
Yeah, it also doesn't help when Renew's in foul trouble, so they can really focus on Ware. I went 3 for 8 last game, and did go 4 or 5 from the line. But as that happens, it's one of those things where teams make adjustments, and you're going to have to prove that you can play in different ways. And so, again, that's why I think Johnson will help in that regard. But Indiana did take 16 threes, believe it or not, against Morehead State. So when they would kick it out from those doubles, they were shooting, but only connected on 3 of them. And I know it's been bad. Everybody knows it's been bad, but I was looking at the stats today and realized that there's not a single Hoosier that is even averaging 1 made 3 a game this season through 11. Their top 3-point shooter as far as makes is Mbaka with 8 made threes in 11 games. That's just unheard of.
Yeah, and that's not going to be able to sustain Indiana. Even when you have a really good inside game like they can have, somebody has to step up and hit some of these shots. You don't have to hit 10 a game, but you really got to have 4, 5, 6 shots a game go down, and then run your offense the way you have been, because that's what you're going to do. And they've got to start hitting more free throws. This is a team that has a starting guard who's shooting 50% from the free throw line. You can't have that either.
Yeah, it can win and lose you games, especially in the Big Ten. Other than the Kansas game, of course, the 2 games Indiana got blown out, but Indiana has this experience of playing all these close games against a lot of lower ranked teams that they've kind of squeaked out wins, and including the one, in Michigan, that was important to win that one. Hopefully Indiana will take that as experience of finding ways to win, because I think the entire Big Ten schedule, it's going to be a war every single night. And as you mentioned, though, the free throw portion of the game is going to win and lose some games. So got to figure it out. It seems like it's been a problem for a while. I'm not really sure why. Other than a layup, it's the easiest shot in the game. Confidence, step up there, knock it down. It could be contagious, though. They start seeing some go through. Obviously, Mbaka is great from the foul line. You start seeing some go through, and hopefully get confidence and continue that from there.
Well, and they've got to get it worked out, because the Big Ten season, while the Big Ten is not looking as strong as, not that we thought it was going to be this juggernaut, but I thought it was going to be a little bit better than it looks at this moment. Don't know what it's going to be in a month from now. Things change. Teams get better. Teams find their rhythm. It could be Northwestern. It could be Ohio State that comes out of nowhere. It could be Illinois that challenges Purdue. We already know Purdue is the lone team that's up there. Wisconsin has a chance at looking good. And Iowa, I'm not sure what they're going to do. They're going to get up and down the floor, but it's going to be interesting. Indiana is going to have to hold serve at home for those games, but before we get to that, we still have 2 more games for them to play tonight to boost their record a little bit, I guess you'd say. Currently 8-3, so they'll at least should be 10-3 going into Big Ten play, which then if you split the Big Ten, if you go into Big Ten play 10-3 and you split Big Ten play, you're going to be 20-13. And boy, that keeps you on that Mendoza line. And normally that wouldn't be a bad place to be, especially with the Big Ten. But that's going to be a little tenuous this season because of what I just said, and the fact that Indiana currently does not have a signature win.
Yeah, they're going to need some of those, whether it's knocking off Purdue again, whether it's taking down Illinois. Wisconsin is ranked, so they're going to need some of those. Yeah, it's possible too that the field is so, I guess mid would be the word, not just in the Big Ten, but across college basketball. A lot of parity, but there's a lot of mediocrity. That could help them in terms of a lot of other teams kind of around the bubble that don't have huge signature wins either. But yeah, they're going to have to take care of business. If you look at that Big Ten conference schedules, or any game that stands out to you as like that's a for sure win, that's an easy win, because I don't really even see any of those. So obviously at home against some of those weaker teams, you would think, but then you got those games like Morehead State, Wright State, some of those games that should have been that way that were not. So Indiana's got to win at home, as you said. They got to knock off a couple of those ranked teams in the conference, and then maybe make a little noise in the tournament, conference tournament, and see where their chips fall.